Hi, my name is Nicole, and I'm 15. Have you ever been jealous of your other half? Like you followed him, got into his phone? Watch this video to the end, and you will find out how I was locked in the basement because of jealousy. I live with my parents, and I think their relationship is just perfect. I have a boyfriend, and even though we've only been dating for a month, I think he is the love of my life. No, really. You might think, what does this girl know about love? She is only 15. But you are wrong. Real feelings do not depend on age. Max plays on the basketball team, and all the girls from school are drooling over him and envying me. We spend a lot of time together, and I am just crazy about him. But he still doesn't know my parents. I'm afraid they might not like him as much as I do. But after a few sleepless nights, I decided that Max is my first boyfriend, and my parents must know him. One day, my dad suggested that we go to the woods for a weekend, and it was just the perfect time to meet Max. We agreed to meet early in the morning near my house. I didn't sleep all night. Max was also worried, but from the first seconds, my parents welcomed him as their son. They were very friendly with him, joking, and at first glance, everything was perfect. Did you introduce your parents to someone you love? How was it with you? Share it in the comments. But when we arrived in the forest, the rosy ideas of rest disappeared, as did the good weather. It started raining hard, and I passed out in the car because of a sleepless night. The parents wanted to save the holiday and went to get firewood, and Max was asked to set up a tent. When they returned, dripping wet, not only did Max do nothing, but he tore up the tent. Dad snapped and started yelling at Max. Even I was woken up by his screams. I didn't understand what was going on, but I was very embarrassed in front of Max. He drove home in silence, and I was ashamed. At dinner, my parents said very sharply that Max was not serious, that he was lazy and did not suit me at all. But I didn't think so. I didn't know how to prove to them that Max was completely different. He was strong, cool, and the most important thing, I loved him. After the hike, my dad wouldn't let me see Max. So when Max invited me to the amusement park, I just ran away from home. We had fun, ate popcorn, and the time passed very quickly. I wanted to sneak into my room, but as soon as I stepped through the door, my mother deafened me with her scream and started blaming Max for everything, saying that he was spoiling me, blah blah. She told me that he wasn't right for me, that his father was a drunkard, and that all children were reflections of their parents. I couldn't believe my mother was saying that. I ran into my room and cried all night. The next morning, she came to my room, asked me to forget yesterday, hugged me, and invited me to the movies. How could I refuse her? We bought ice cream and went to find our seats. But then I saw the displeasure on my mother's face. Behind us was Max and his friends. They talked very loudly, drew attention to themselves, and laughed at those who made remarks to them. So I was suffering without him, and Max was having a good time with his friends. This enraged me, and my mother immediately grabbed my hand, asked Max not to embarrass us, and we left. The evening was ruined. All the way home, we were silent, and my mother's face read, "I hate my daughter's boyfriend." After the incident in the cinema, I was very sad, and I began to understand that my parents were right about something. Max was really starting to show a different side of himself. He screwed up the tent, never told me who his father was, went out with his friends and had fun, and seemed quite happy without me. I thought about him every day. I wanted to meet him as soon as possible. And maybe my parents were right, and he wasn't really right for me. I fell asleep that night with one thought. I had to break up with him. It was better this way. In the morning, I woke up in a bad mood, and I got a text message from Max inviting me to a party. My parents would never let me go, so I lied that I was going to a friend to do a report, chose a chic outfit, and went to the party. But when I arrived, I couldn't find Max anywhere. I was already angry with him because he had invited me and still hadn't shown up. After a while, I noticed him near the pool with Ruth. This is my classmate. She was flirting with him.
Ooh.
She was giggling, laughing, and constantly trying to take his hand. I knew I was here to break up with Max, but for the first time in my life, I was jealous, and I was out of control. Have you ever been jealous? What would you do if your boyfriend praised the figure of your friend or classmate? I wanted to attack this bitch, but they suddenly got up and went somewhere. I followed them to the basement, found a key on the wall, and locked the door from the inside so no one would escape. I didn't know what was going to happen, but my hands were shaking and my heart was pounding. I tried to peek, but I couldn't, and my palms were so sweaty that the key just slipped out. I didn't even notice it. When I heard Max say, "Wow, you're beautiful," I couldn't stand it. I jumped out of the ambush and started yelling at him that he was a traitor and scumbag, that I was suffering for nothing because of him, but he looked at me like I was crazy. He freaked out and started saying that Ruth just asked him to help her get the speakers out of the basement and that she was flirting with him, and Max was just commenting on a video with a dog. Ruth jerked and ran to the door. She tried to get out, but the door was closed. I searched my pockets for the key, but realized I'd lost it. Ruth and I were in a real panic. We were shouting for help, but we couldn't be heard over the loud music. There was no connection, so we decided to wait a little in case someone noticed that we were missing. At first, we sat in silence, but after 10 minutes, we started talking. Max joked about the stupid situation we're in, and Ruth and I even managed to make up. But as time went on, it got worse and worse. Ruth began to gasp, tossing from side to side, and literally climbing the walls. Max realized that this was a panic attack, and we had to get out of this terrible place as quickly as possible. Ruth's panic got through me, and I just started crying because it was all my fault. But Max behaved like a real man. He silently began to stack the old boxes on top of each other, wrapped his shirt around his fist, and stood on the unstable structure. God, you have no idea how much I admired him. And at the same time, I was worried. He broke the window, and in a few minutes, we were free. I apologized to Max for a long time that I suspected him of cheating and doubted him because of the influence of my parents. He forgave me and suggested that we always discussed all problems together. Max also found the owners of the house, apologized, and promised to pay for the replacement of the glass. And when everyone heard the beautiful story of our rescue from the basement, everyone envied me even more. Ha ha. We spent the rest of the party together, and we even kissed. Yes, it was our first kiss, and I still can't believe it. I told my parents empathically that Max was a serious young man, and I would continue seeing him, whether they wanted to or not. My parents weren't happy, but I'm stubborn and I can't be persuaded. And after a while, they didn't care at all. At the end of the school year, I was seriously talked to, and for the first time, such a terrible word, divorce, was uttered. I couldn't imagine how a 20-year relationship could end in one moment. Although, probably not in one. I just did not notice a lot of things. Maybe that's why they were so hard on Max. They didn't want me to go through a painful breakup. But they were wrong. It was Max who helped me through the most difficult first months of my new life. Gradually, Mom and Dad got used to it, already separately from each other. I used to drive between houses every week. Well, what awaits me and Max? Time will tell. But I know he won't leave me in the lurch. That's the main thing. And the fact that he is a basketball player is a nice bonus. Hee hee. If you like this story, please like it and write a comment. Don't forget to write comments and trust your heart. Have a nice day.
Hi, my name is Mia. I'm 17. Have you ever argued with your best friend over a boyfriend so that she blocked you and didn't want to see you at all? Watch this video to the end and you will learn how I tried to seduce the fiancé of my close friend to prove that he was a womanizer and how it all ended. I have a best friend, Olivia, who is 19 and about to get married. We were close from childhood, our parents were friends all the time, and we are also now inseparable. I am interested in psychology. I have always been interested in understanding why people act in a certain way. What is the secret of a happy family relationship? How to find yourself in this life? I had a lot of questions, and I hope to find answers to them with the help of psychology. Together with Olivia, we started going to lectures at the psychological club in our town. I read a lot of articles on the internet and shared it with a friend. But then she started skipping classes, and she didn't even have time to read. She met Ed and fell head over heels in love with him. Olivia even stopped talking to me and spent all her free time with her boyfriend. I believe that friendship is stronger than love, but I did not judge Olivia, knowing her romantic and passionate nature. I was curious to see what she saw in Ed. Have your friends ever sacrificed your friendship for the point plans and all for the sake of another passion? And then one day, a month after our last conversation, Olivia called me very happy and said that she was getting married. I was a little offended. My best friend was getting married, and she told me this over the phone, not in person, and I still hadn't met her future husband. But then, Olivia said that the wedding was in 2 weeks, and she wanted me to be a bridesmaid and help with the arrangements. I loved Olivia very much, and I couldn't ceremony together and ordered a wedding cake from a pastry shop. Olivia really wanted the beautiful memories of the wedding to remain and asked me to find a picturesque place for a photo shoot. I knew a place and suggested my friend to go there, but Olivia was too busy trying on a custom-made wedding dress, so she sent Ed instead. I didn't mind. It was an excuse to get to know him better. We didn't have much time to get to know each other in this pre-wedding rush. I wanted to know the coast with Ed, and he was very nice and joked all the way. I found myself actually liking him. But friendship was sacred to me. We arrived at the site, took a few test shots, choosing the best angle. And then, during one of those funny selfies, Ed kissed my neck like he was rehearsing a wedding photo. I was embarrassed by what he did. He laughed it off and said that he had imagined Olivia instead of me. I forced a smile, but something inside me skipped a beat. I thought it was strange. I felt awkward. I didn't want to upset Olivia. I decided to finish the photo session and quickly go home. I was uncomfortable being alone with Ed. It was as if nothing had happened to him. He was still sweetly joking and smiling at me. I sent Olivia pictures from the coast, but I deleted that one with a kiss. My friend was delighted with the scenery and thanked me. I was a little ashamed that I hadn't told her what had happened. Although, maybe I was imagining it. Ed was actually posing for the camera, rehearsing a wedding kiss with Olivia. Olivia had to choose a wedding bouquet and decoration of the hall. So we met at the flower salon. When she was discussing all the details with the florist, I decided to go to the coffee shop across the street for coffee. Because it was going to be a long day. I wanted to cheer up a little. As I walked across the road, I looked around and saw couples in love. And I was very glad that many people found their second halves and lived happily. I even envied Olivia for a second that she too had found the love of her life, and I was now practically without a friend. While I was thinking about it, I looked at the windows of the house that had a coffee shop and saw a couple kissing in one of them. And the guy looked a lot like Ed. I went closer to see, and I was right. It was Ed, and he was making out with a strange girl. I couldn't believe that Ed was cheating on Olivia while she was getting ready for their wedding. I quickly took the coffee and went back with the clear intention of telling Olivia everything. She didn't deserve to be treated like this. She had to know the truth. But when I got back to the store, I found her so happy and in flowers. Olivia chose white roses. She said they were a symbol of her pure love. She confessed that she was madly in love with Ed, and if something happened to him and he disappeared from her life, she would simply die of grief. She wanted me to understand her feelings. And instead of turning Ed in, I didn't say anything. I was afraid of breaking my friend's heart, and I didn't know how best to tell her that Ed was a traitor and a cheater. What would you do if you were me? How often have you had to tell your loved ones unpleasant news? I was confused and upset after this situation. I decided to go to my mother for advice. My mother was always reasonable and fair, and I hoped she would help me. My mother said that cheating was a serious accusation, and it was better to check more carefully to see if I was right about Ed before I told her. But there was still a chance that Olivia wouldn't believe it. Love is blind. We often do not notice or do not want to notice the shortcomings of our second half. The next day, Olivia called me again, tearfully asking me to take Ed to a jewelry store in a nearby town. Only there they sold the wedding rings they needed. And my finger was exactly the same size as Olivia's. I couldn't refuse her. But it was hard for me to do it after what I saw. I didn't know how to behave with Ed. On the way, he was unusually silent and thoughtful. I didn't want to talk to him either. Then, all of a sudden, he said that he had seen me from the hotel window yesterday and knew that I had also seen him with another woman. He thanked me for not telling Olivia about it and asked what he could do for me as a token of appreciation for my silence. He said that he was ready to fulfill any whim of mine, even the most forbidden. I definitely didn't expect this. Actually, I wanted to tell her, but I just felt sorry for my friend. And now I saw that Ed wasn't even sorry for what he'd done and started flirting with me in a brazen way. What an asshole! I was mad at him, but I didn't show it. I had a plan in mind. I said that I didn't blame him for his innocent pranks and was ready to support them. Ed took it as an invitation, stopped the photo mode on my phone, and secretly shooed it. Now I had dirt and at least some proof that he was a womanizer and wouldn't miss a skirt. I didn't flirt with him again, and I tried to avoid being close to him all the way. Ed was deeply unpleasant to me. He lied to my best friend and was willing to cheat on her, even with me. We bought the rings. They were very beautiful. Too bad it was all for nothing. After this trip, I planned to open Olivia's eyes so that she would cancel this wedding and not link her life with a traitor. We met at a beauty salon. She was getting a wedding manicure. I decided to start talking about Ed right away. But I started from afar so that I could gradually prepare my friend. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to get married because marriage was for life. And what if Ed was not the right person she wanted and she was badly mistaken in his account? After all, they were so little acquainted and did not have time to get to know each other properly. Olivia looked at me and said I was just jealous. I was offended by those words because I wanted Olivia to be happy and I wanted to save her from a broken heart. She didn't believe my intentions. So I just took out my phone and showed her a photo of me and Ed kissing in the car. The facts should have changed her mind. Olivia saw the picture and burst into tears. I put my arms around her and started stroking her hair, reassuring her that she would find someone better than Ed, that everything was still ahead of her, and this was not the last love of her life. When Olivia calmed down, she looked at me and thanked me for showing my true face before her wedding. Olivia accused me of seducing Ed, called me a traitor, and forbade me to appear at the wedding or in her life at all. That's how I lost my best friend. Olivia demanded that I leave and not spoil her pre-wedding mood and prevent her from preparing further. I left the salon with tears in my eyes. I was so hurt that my friend didn't believe me. We had been through so much with her. I was willing to do a lot for her. And because of some jerk who didn't deserve a hair off of her head, she ended our long-standing friendship. It was my fault too. My plan to expose Ed had failed miserably. Yeah, the photo of me kissing him wasn't the best solution. I looked like a scheming seductress, and he looked like an innocent victim. Ed would probably get away with it and blame it on me. Despite Olivia's hurtful words to me, I really wanted to complete my plan. My friend had to be rescued from this freak. He would ruin her life, and I had no choice but to turn to Olivia's brother, Max. He was 20. He'd known Ed longer than any of us, so I doubted Max would take my side. But I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to prevent this wedding in any way possible. I showed Max a photo of me kissing Ed, told him about seeing him in the window with another woman the day before. I begged him to believe me and help me prevent Olivia from marrying this traitor. Max looked at me incredulously at first. And then I told him that Olivia had broken off her friendship with me and forbidden me to go to the wedding. But it didn't matter to me because I only wanted what's best for her, so I was doing everything I could to get Ed out of her life. Have you ever tried to help your friend against his will, even if he no longer considered you a friend? Max knew what our friendship meant to Olivia and how I felt about her, and he often called us sisters. He knew that I would never wish my friend any harm. So Max agreed to help, but offered to collect even more evidence of Ed's infidelity. We're planning to go to the mall to buy some small items for the wedding. I went there in the hope that Ed would slip up and somehow give himself away and I would take a picture of it. But I was so involved in tracking that I didn't notice when I went towards Ed and Olivia. They saw me immediately. I said hello to them and Olivia pretended not to know me. It stuck with me. She ignored me, but forgave Ed, who was really guilty before her, and smiled sweetly at him. I wanted to talk to her again and explain everything. I missed her and our friendship. And then, suddenly, I got a text from Olivia saying that she would be waiting for me in 5 minutes in the cosmetics department. This both pleased and alarmed me. Why did she pass me with such a haughty air? I ran like a bullet to the cosmetics department to find out. Olivia rushed over there, anxious and lost. She looked depressed. Olivia had discovered Ed's texts with a girl, and they had discussed a lot of juicy details about the previous evening when Ed had allegedly met with friends about a bachelor party. Olivia immediately remembered my photo and what I'd said about it, and she had the general impression that Ed wasn't who he said he was, that he didn't love her and had affairs. But Olivia was afraid to cancel the wedding. Everything was already ready, and she asked me for advice on what to do. I reassured my friend and said that I would support her. I had a plan to expose Ed right at the wedding, as if by accident, and he would disrupt the wedding and make a complete freak of himself in public. This would be a lesson for him. Olivia calmed down a bit, came to her senses, and hugged me just like in the good old days. I missed it so much. I was touched and wanted to get rid of Ed, who had caused us so much trouble. The wedding day came. I should have been there with her, but I had to do it without being seen. So I disguised myself as a waitress. No one ever paid any attention to the servants. Ed didn't see me, and no one could ruin our plan. The moment of the solemn toast and the bridegroom's speech came. Ed went on stage, thanked all the guests for coming, and asked them to open the envelopes in which, according to him, a pleasant surprise was waiting for them. All the guests had such an envelope under their plate, where there should have been a personal message with a wish of gratitude from the bride and groom. But instead, there was a photo of Ed kissing a strange girl, and a printed screen of their romantic texts after a stormy night. Dirt that would show everyone who he really was. When everyone saw these pictures, many people began to leave the table. There was a noise in the banquet hall, and someone from Olivia's side even tried to kick him in the ass. Have you ever been a guest at a wedding or other family event, and on one where everything went wrong and the celebration turned into chaos and confusion? I watched from the kitchen doorway. The holiday turned into a family tragedy, and Olivia couldn't stand the tension and disappeared from the crowd. I felt sorry for her, but deep down, I felt elated that Ed had been publicly exposed. He realized what the guests really saw and ran towards the kitchen to get out of sight of the angry relatives of the bride. And then he happened to meet my eyes. He saw my happy face and turned red with anger. Ed realized that I was behind the whole show, that I made it. He came at me furiously as if he were going to kill me. I was even a little confused, didn't know what to expect from him now, and backed away. And then Olivia's parents showed up, and they took Ed by the arm and said they needed to talk to him seriously, and they took him somewhere. I finally exhaled. It was over. My friend was saved. I went home with a sense of accomplishment. I had been very tired over the past week. All of these feelings for Olivia, spying on Ed, development of a plan of retaliation and exposure. I was sleeping it off for 24 hours. I thought Olivia needed some time alone too, so I took a break after the wedding and didn't call her for a few days. And then I decided to dial, but found that her number was not available. I started writing to her in social networks, but she banned me. I honestly didn't understand what was going on and what I had done wrong again. I went to Olivia's house to talk to her in person. Her parents opened the door for me. They greeted me with coolness, not even offering to enter. Her parents said that Olivia was going through a difficult time. She decided to completely erase from her life everyone who had anything to do with this failed wedding and reminded of it. And I wasn't just a reminder. It all started when I took that stupid photo of me and Ed kissing. And this photo led to the fact that, at the request of a friend, I sabotaged her wedding. She needed time to accept it and forget it, like a bad dream. But how could Olivia not understand that I just wanted her to be happy and helped her as much as I could? I didn't think that my desire to reveal the truth would put an end to our long-standing friendship. I just wanted to protect Olivia from an unhappy marriage with a cheating husband, and I ended up on the list of people who should be erased along with bad memories. After all, I had the right to talk to Olivia. I really wanted her to explain her disregard for me and maybe change her mind about me. I waited for her in the park where she was walking her dog and asked for an explanation from her side. And Olivia said she found out something about me. They'd had a long conversation with Ed after the wedding was disrupted, and he'd confessed, apologized, and said that he wasn't the only traitor and that Olivia should take a closer look at her friend. Ed said that from the very first moment he experienced my equivocal glances. And when I went to the sea with him to choose a place for a photo shoot, I kissed him, and he recoiled from me and said that it was extremely mean. Olivia asked me if it was a kiss. I didn't want to lie to her, and I told her that yes, we kissed, but it wasn't like Ed described. But Olivia didn't want to listen to me anymore. She said she was grateful for my help, but she wasn't ready to keep me around just yet. Olivia didn't trust me anymore, and she was right about something. I hid that kiss, deleted that photo. I didn't say anything. I wasn't being friendly. After this conversation, I decided that I would never again intrude and interfere in the personal lives of my friends, even if they make mistakes before my eyes. My friend has the right to live her life as she wants and learn from her personal experience, make her own personal choices, and not listen to the advice of others. If you are touched by my story, please like and subscribe to my channel. Have a good day and let your loved ones always trust you.
Hi, my name is Christy, and I turned 17 this year. Before, I just loved riding a fast bike, but due to a broken bicycle chain during one of these trips, I got a terrible spinal injury and became a hostage to my own body. I remember very well how my life was divided into before and after in an instant. Losing control, I screamed and flew off my bike onto the road. That's all I remember until I fell into darkness. I woke up a couple days later in the hospital. My body was in a full body cast and unable to move. However, I am lucky, despite the fact that my legs barely obey me after the injury. I have loving and supporting parents and a boyfriend, Matt. Despite this terrible incident, we became only closer. Matt gave me his word that he would never leave me, and we even decided to go to the same university together after high school, so that we would never break up. After undergoing rehabilitation, I remained a disabled person who always walked on crutches, but I was still able to fully attend school. Now my future depended only on a mock test. I waited for the results with excitement. I left half the questions unanswered, and finally, the day came for the test results to be announced. Have you ever failed a very important exam? It was just awful. Apparently, due to a long absence from school, I was not able to prepare for the mock test properly. This meant that there was a chance of falling short on the admission points and letting Matt down. I couldn't let that happen. While dealing with my school problems, Matt became a lacrosse player. At his first match, I sat in the front row and cheered him the loudest. Some guy from middle school started bothering me. He asked, "Why do you need these things? Are you old?" I tried not to pay attention to this upstart and just enjoy the match. But he kept asking, "Do these things grow out of you?" Because I wasn't paying attention to him, he reached for my crutch and snatched it out of my hands. I tried to take it back, but I couldn't help but fall down the bleachers. Everyone turned to look at me and whispered softly, trying to figure out what had happened. Matt interrupted the game and rushed to me. He shouted that it would be better for him to not come here anymore. As soon as I recovered from the pitch-black darkness, Matt held my head in his lap and squeezed my hand. I looked at him as if he were a real Superman who had saved me from a terrible danger. I didn't want to spend another minute without my hero. While Matt was running for Brilliant Green and bandages to treat my torn knees, I saw the phone he'd left next to me. I would never check his phone, but then the screen lit up and a message from some girl popped up on it. "You're so cool playing lacrosse. Do you want to go for a walk today?" What I saw made me flare up. Had Matt been seeing someone else? Well, why did he need a girlfriend on crutches when there were so many beautiful girls hanging around him? After my boyfriend came back and saw my puzzled face and his phone, he decided to explain that these were just annoying groupies, and I didn't need to worry about it. As we were leaving the game, our mutual friends came up to us and invited us to a party for the first lacrosse game of the year. I used to be a party girl myself, but this time my studies came first. I couldn't let Matt down, which meant I had to prepare brilliantly for the exam. That's why we both declined the offer together, because Matt promised me that he would help with the preparation and our common dream of admissions to come true. But we didn't manage to properly study because someone always distracted us. The endless calls and texts on Matt's phone were driving me nuts. When Matt finally picked up the phone and answered the call, he immediately started packing up. He explained to me that he was still part of the team, so he should be at the party now. and I could handle studying by myself. I was so upset, and I was beginning to wonder if he even wanted to go to the same university together. I blamed myself that because of this failure of the mock test, Matt had given up on me. But that was just the beginning. A couple of weeks later, Matt invited the entire school to his birthday party. Even those annoying groupies came who had been texting him endlessly. But I didn't get any attention from my boyfriend that night. Someone was always hanging around him, congratulating him, giving him gifts, and it was as if I didn't exist to him at all. So I decided to get everyone's attention and wish Matt a happy birthday so everyone could see. I thanked Matt with all my heart for being with me in a difficult moment and not leaving me alone. But it seemed Matt didn't appreciate the effort and interrupted me with a ridiculous joke. It was obvious that he was shy of me. I felt humiliated. Everyone was laughing at me, but Matt didn't save me this time. I go home in tears and try to erase the evening from my memory. Everything was going downhill, one after the other. First the injury, then the failed test, and now the relationship problems. Not only that, because of my illness, I lost my favorite activity, cycling. Now my boyfriend also began to be shy with me in front of his new friends. After Matt's birthday, we didn't talk about what happened, and he pretended that nothing had happened at all. We both still tried to prepare for admissions, but it was, to put it mildly, with great difficulty. Matt became very irritable, snapping at me on every question. I tried to smooth things over as best I could, didn't run into any problems, and as far as possible, managed to cope with the tasks alone. This preparation was a real hell for me. There was no question of studying when my mind was only on the problems of my relationship with Matt. Well, how can it not be upsetting when your ideal relationship falls apart for no apparent reason? My mother is a very attentive person. She noticed that I had been in a bad mood for several days. I refused to eat and did not leave the house at all. It had been a while since Matt came to visit us. After she asked me about what had happened, I told her about the incident at the birthday party and how he had left me alone to study and went to have fun with his friends. We had always done everything together. And then my mom suggested that we invite Matt to a family dinner and discuss everything in a quiet atmosphere. To my surprise, Matt agreed and came to our house at the appointed time, but apparently he did not want to stay long. He came to tell me that he had already applied to another university where lacrosse players had a large scholarship, and that he and I were not on the way anymore. It was a real blow to me. Was the whole world collapsing in front of my eyes? Relationships started to erode. Then I thought I had a chance to fix it, and that Matt would change his mind. To do this, I decided to come to his friends, with whom he had spent a lot of time with. Matt was basking in a group of female fans, and when he saw me, he jumped up and started yelling about how he wished I hadn't been there. In a huff, I went out and started down the stairs, but Matt caught my hand on the landing and confessed that he couldn't see me anymore because of my disability. In 1 second, I lost everything. In shock at what I heard, I staggered back and did not notice the step, and I tripped and fell down the stairs. I had deja vu as I again got out of the impenetrable darkness. Matt was no longer with me, but the doctor. I was already expecting the worst prognosis for myself, but the doctor told me that I had a chance to get to choose between my health and going to university. Who I didn't expect to see in the hospital was my boyfriend. Or, I should probably say my ex, that he wasn't allowed to study at the university giving the lacrosse scholarship. He said he was sorry for his embarrassment of my disability, and that this was just a test that he went through, and realized that he loved me. I forgave him, We began to rebuild our relationship and to be together no matter what. What about the university? Matt suggested that we go together next year. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories.